All right, how to structure your life as a producer. So I haven't seen a video like this at all, so I wanted to make one myself. And the closest thing I've seen to a video like this would be how to organize your files as a producer. And the last video I've seen about that was like 2018. I wanted to make this and show everybody how I structure my own life as a producer and how I stay organized. There's 5 different pillars: planning your week, sending out, tracking your income and expenses, organizing your files, and mindset. For all of these, mindset kind of mainly plays into how to plan your week, but it could translate into everything. So to start off with mindset, figure out what do you truly want from music. So take time to think about this, even journal about it if you want. Figure out what you truly want from music, what lane you want to pursue. And after you figure that out, figure out your priorities. So based on what you want to pursue. For me, as an example, I want to prioritize selling kits and making content, and then kind of placements are kind of on the back burner. My number 1 would be kits, number 2 content, and 3 placements, which would be making beats, samples, or starters. Figure out your priorities and then number them from most important to least important. Then setting input-based goals. So I feel like setting goals and how to do it correctly isn't really talked about enough. Most people, when they think about setting goals, they think about getting 10,000 followers by a specific date, getting $10,000 a month by this specific date. That's not really measurable in my opinion, so I feel like setting goals based on how much input there is more measurable. Posting 4 reels a week, sending out 5 loops a week, that's way more measurable for how successful you are and how much you're moving the needle, as opposed to just like a number by a specific date like followers or like how much money you're making. After mindset, we move over to how to plan your week. So this is how I plan my week. I use Notion. I use a simple to-do list page. I don't really use a like habit tracker or like a complicated ass template for Notion. I just use the to-do list on like a normal blank Notion page with color codings. If you don't want to use Notion, you can use the Apple Notes app, or you could use a calendar app. I'll get into how I don't use a calendar app, but it's good if you work like that. I'll explain that in a second. So I plan my weeks on Sundays, and I plan according to my priorities and then my goals. And the color coding is red for important. I usually have red for events that I have to go to, stuff I have to do that specific day, whether it's a doctor appointment, an event, like a session. And this is where usually if I had a calendar, I would put the events in the calendar, but I don't. I have everything on my to-do list. So I just have the events in red and the first thing for that specific day. Orange is content, green is music making, and then blue is business. So green is make 5 sounds for a kit, make 1 to 2 samples, make 1 to 2 beats. Orange is like record and edit 1 reel, post 3 IG stories. And then blue is like sending to artists, DM 5 producers to work with, write 2 emails, set up website automations, stuff like that. So yeah, the better option is to have a to-do list and a calendar. I just have a to-do list and put my events that I would normally put in a calendar just on my to-do list in red. It's however you want to work, to each their own. This is just how I work, but if you want to have a to-do list and a calendar, that's like what most people do. So moving on to organizing your files. So this is how I organize all my music. I usually would have whatever year it is for the folders. So 2025 would be right here. And then I would have all the months from 1 to 12 listed. Then for each month, I would have the beats, the samples, and the starters, the kits, and the sessions for that specific month. So in the beats folder, I would have all the bounces, the FLPs, and then the Fruity Loops project files because I'm in FL Studio. And then the stems for samples and starters, there would be a samples and a starters folder for each one. In samples, I would also have the bounces, the FLPs, and then the stems. And then for starters, I would just have the bounces because I put the stems at the end of the MP3 file. So it's all in just the bounces. All the stems are in the bounces for the starters. For kits, I would just have the kit folder itself zipped or unzipped. And then sessions, I only have online sessions right now, so I just have the name of the person, the date of the session, and then whatever unorganized music files I made in that session, I just have in that folder until I organize it and put it into the beats folder, the sample starters folder, or the kits folder, depending on what the session was for. And I name my files like this. So if it's a sample, I have my name, the producer's name. If it's a collab, the sample name and the BPM. If it's a beat, I have my name, the producer's name. If it's a collab, the beat name, the BPM, and then the vibe. So I send out to different types of artists. So I normally put the genre, the tempo or the vibe of whatever the beat is. So for this I put dark R&B. I could put like fast melodic, trap melodic, stuff like that. And then back up to 2 different hard drives, not just one. I have 2 Lacy's right here. Let me show that real quick. I have 2 of those. Moving on to organizing, sending out your music. I feel like this is how I stay organized with sending out my music, so I don't get confused when like sending to artists, producers, and engineers. I know exactly who I need to send what to. So for artists, if I have their phone number, I have the artist name under that subcategory, and then what kind of beats they want. For this artist, it would be R&B, pop, dancehall beats, and then this artist would be mainly R&B beats, Afro beats too. For producers, the subcategories are phone numbers, Discord, and emails, and also Instagram DMs. I have the producer's name and whether they want to be sent samples, the kits I make, or starters. This specific producer wants samples in my kits, and then this specific producer only wants samples. This is in parentheses because I pay for a program that sends out my emails individually, because if you send out BCC emails in 2025, you're probably going to get blocked. I send out all of my emails individually, and you could pay for something like GMass to do that for you. I don't use GMass, I use something else. I'll get to that in a second. And if I'm vaguely connected to a producer, I send them Dropbox samples, or a Dropbox of my samples sometimes. I only have 1 producer in real life, like on my actual list, that I send a Dropbox of samples to through DMs, so that's why that's there. But for engineers, also individual emails, I would have the engineer name and then what kind of beats they want. So I pay for Mail Suite. You could pay for GMass too, but Mail Suite sends out mass Gmail campaigns individually to each producer, and it also saves lists of the emails that I put into the program. For producers, I try to send out like 5 to 7 samples a week. I feel that's like a good goal. And then 5 starters every 1 to 2 weeks. And I try to get producers' numbers to send to them when I'm trying to work with them. For artists and engineers, I send out beats right after I make them usually. And I try to get the artist numbers as well, because it's good to text artist beats. So I send out through email, iMessage, or WhatsApp, depending on where they are in the world, Discord, and Instagram DMs. Very rarely. The last thing, tracking income and expenses. So I recently switched to Rocket Money. I did have an Excel spreadsheet of all my income and expenses, but it got kind of confusing to handle because it was like inaccurate for so many months. I recommend just paying for something like Rocket Money that'll track everything. So for tracking your income, I list all my revenue streams like kits, placements, YouTube, etc., and keep a monthly log of how much I made from each stream. For expenses, I keep track of all my subscriptions and everything you need to pay for a month as a producer. For taxes, try to set aside 20 to 30% of income, because I recently got fucked over because I didn't keep track of any of my expenses or income for taxes. I didn't think I qualified for taxes, but I did. So please, this is extremely important. So that is pretty much how I organize my entire life as a producer. Hopefully this helps anyone who watches this out. I feel like this is something that'll be beneficial to a lot of people.